Hello, everyone. Tony Costa here from Toronto Apologetics. Today, I want to discuss the woke leftist attack on Canada's Christian heritage and roots. As you know, whenever we come across or come near to the Christmas season or even Easter, there's always the typical attacks that come from the woke left on how Christmas is colonial, it's patriarchal, it's white privilege. It was brought here by the colonial settlers and so forth and so on. And so it turns into the time of bashing Christianity in terms of attacking Christmas or Easter. The reason why I mention this is because this has already started, it's already going on. And I wanted to share an article with you that appeared in the Toronto Sun entitled Christmas, Easter, Part of Canada's Colonial Bias Report. And it goes on to say, here in this article, a recent human rights report calls government holidays for Christmas and Easter discriminatory to religious minorities in Canada. Now, I don't know how it's discriminatory to them because most religious minorities, if they are employed with various institutions, they are given these days as holidays, as statutory holidays. But it goes on to say here that statutory holidays related to Christianity, including Christmas and Easter, are the only Canadian statutory holidays linked to religious holy days, said the discussion paper on religious intolerance. And I want you to catch that, the discussion paper on religious intolerance. Which religion are they being intolerant of here? Well, you guessed it, Christianity. So they're discussing religious intolerance while they're practicing religious intolerance against Christianity. It goes on to say, as a result, non-Christians may need to request special accommodation to observe their holy days. The earliest mention of Christmas in Canada dates to 1641, according to the Canadian Encyclopedia. Jesuit missionary Jean de Brebeuf, who lived among the Huron of Georgian Bay, composed a Christmas carol telling the story of the birth of Jesus. Oh my, that must have been horrific, according to the woke leftist position. Canada's history with religious intolerance is deeply rooted in our identity as a settler colonial state. So whenever you hear terms like colonial, colonist, this is a typical buzzword for the woke leftist position or the cultural Marxists. And so the West is accused of colonialism. Of course, we're not going to talk about other nations, other empires that practiced colonization. No one talks about the Roman Empire. They colonized most of Western Europe. No one talks about the Islamic Empire that after the death of Muhammad in 632 AD, went out and Islamicized the world, took over the Middle East, India, North Africa, even as far as Spain and Portugal, where they were later removed and pushed out by Charles Martel. Of course, all history is colonial history. All ancient civilizations practiced colonialism, and it still goes on today. And so it's interesting that it's only the West that is attacked. It's only the West that is demonized for this. So when I talk about Canada's history with religious intolerance, it's a very interesting statement because as far as I know, various religious groups were permitted and allowed to practice the religion in Canada, whether it was Jews or Hindus or Sikhs or Buddhists, whatever it may be. And then it says, no one is free until we are all free. And what that translates to is until we get rid of all this Christian heritage, all this Christian structure, then we'll finally be free. This is a typical Marxist, cultural Marxist argument, the decimation of the West and its practices. Many societies, including our own, have been constructed in a way that places value on certain traits or identities to the exclusion of others. Well, all societies do that. And all societies have their own unique traits, and all societies have their own unique history. But notice who they're targeting here. For example, white, male, Christian, English-speaking, thin or fit, not having a disability, heterosexual and gender conforming. Because of this, many people are facing various forms of discrimination. So notice that an example of a certain society that puts value on their traits and their identities and exclude others. Notice who's to blame here. It's the white, male, Christian, English-speaking, thin or fit, not having a disability, as if white people don't have disabilities. Of course they do. Heterosexual and gender conforming. In other words, those who hold to a male-female relation. And gender conforming basically means that you identify with the sex you have at birth, which is what defines you in terms of sexuality and gender. Because of this, many people are facing various forms of discrimination. So notice how there is a indirect, or may I say even direct, argument here that the reason why people are facing these various forms of discrimination is because of the privilege that white male Christian English-speaking people have. Now, if this is not discrimination coming from this group, I don't know what is. And so this type of jargon, folks, is what you would expect in, of course, the woke leftist and cultural Marxist position, because the two main targets that these groups always go for is Christianity and the Western nations that are based on Judeo-Christian principles. And so it goes on to say that the Human Rights Report comes on the heels of a federal court directive 2 years ago to change references to Christmas from the court's calendar despite no complaints. And so they've been going at this for 2 years now. And given that litigants before the courts do not all celebrate Christmas, an amendment is required to change reference to the court's Christmas recess to the more inclusive seasonal recess, set the court's administration service. And so here they're saying we should just get rid of the word Christmas and simply relabel it as seasonal recess. This is what we've seen, for example, in terms of, instead of greeting people with Merry Christmas, people will say Happy Holidays, or they'll say Season's Greetings. Now, do they do this with other religious groups? Do other religious groups remove the religious content of their faiths or their festivals and replace them with more inclusive? Do Muslims change the word Ramadan? Do they change the month of Ramadan for fast month, happy fast month? Would our Jewish friends change the name menorah to holiday candle? So what you see here is clearly it's a one-sided view here, where Christianity, once again, is the enemy, and we need to make adjustments here. And so what this is basically, folks, is this is a attempt to undermine, to scrub, to eliminate any references to our past, to our Judeo-Christian past. And that is one of the aims of the woke left, is to remove what they see to be the oppressor. The oppressor is, once again, white, heterosexual, male Christians in particular. And by removing the oppressor, you can redefine terms, you can rebuild society, and all the more better for it, according to the woke left position. Now, of course, this group, while they're railing against the celebration of Christmas, the point is that you cannot ignore the Judeo-Christian roots of Canada. And so here in the Constitution Act 1982 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, you'll notice it begins with the preamble, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Notice that Canada is founded on what? The first thing is the supremacy of God and the rule of law. You cannot have the rule of law without God. You cannot have objective moral values, objective laws, without a supreme reference point, who is the foundation and ground of all morality, namely God himself. And so even our charter recognizes that these rights are founded on the supremacy of God, and the rule of law is under God. It's not the rule of law above God, but under God. And this God that it speaks of here is the biblical God. Why? Because Canada was established as a British colony in 1867, July 1st, 1867, and it was founded by the grant or the permission of the British monarch at the time was Queen Victoria. And one of the titles of the British monarch is the Defender of the Faith. And the Defender of the Faith there refers to the Christian faith. Now, the present King of Canada, King Charles III, he does not use that title in Canada. but it's still used in the United Kingdom. It's still used in New Zealand. But despite that, when Canada was founded as a nation, the fact that Canadians celebrate Victoria Day every May, as we call it here in Canada, the May 2-4 long weekend, they celebrate Victoria Day in honor of Canada's first monarch. And Queen Victoria gave the grant for the Dominion of Canada in 1867, and she was the head of the Commonwealth and the defender of the faith. What faith? The Christian faith. And so what you see here, folks, is a consistent attempt by the left to do everything in their power to remove any linkage, any connection to our Judeo-Christian past. This is deliberate. This has been in the works for decades. And what you're seeing here is simply the fruition of this ideology. So expect to see more of this in the coming weeks ahead. Thanks for joining, everybody. And don't forget to subscribe to Toronto Apologetics. Just to let you know as well that if you're interested, I'm teaching a course on the book of Revelation starting in January of 2024. If you check my channel there, please look at the video on the book of Revelation. They'll give you more information. And also to let you know that my book, No King But Christ, The Collapse and Bankruptcy of Secular Worldviews, will be out shortly. And I'll be, once that book is published, I will put out a video explaining how you can get a copy of it. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. And we will see you next time. Take care and God bless. Bye for now.